Junior Ventura came from humble beginnings. He grew up in the bustling city of Manila. Life was a constant struggle. Finding a stable job was a priority. He yearned for a better life, not just for himself, but for his family too. Junior was known for his strong work ethic. He was always willing to go the extra mile. He took on odd jobs. He worked as a delivery boy. He even tried his hand at construction. Each job brought its own challenges, but Junior faced them all with determination. One day a glimmer of hope appeared. He saw an ad for a family driver position. The pay was decent, and the benefits were promising. He applied immediately. He went through a series of interviews and anxiously awaited the results. Finally, he received the call. He got the job. Junior was overjoyed. He saw this as a chance to turn his life around. He was ready to dedicate himself to his new employers. He was determined to make the most of this opportunity. The Monteverdes were a well-respected family in Manila. They owned a successful business. They lived in a beautiful mansion. They exuded an aura of wealth and privilege. Junior was initially intimidated. He had never experienced such affluence before. He started his duties with a mix of excitement and nervousness. He drove the children to school. He ran errands for Mrs. Monteverde. He made sure the cars were spotless. He performed every task with utmost diligence. Mr. and Mrs. Monteverde were kind to Junior. They treated him with respect. They appreciated his hard work. They often praised his punctuality and dedication. Junior felt a sense of belonging. He was grateful for their kindness. Junior's relationship with the family grew over time. He became a trusted member of their household. He shared stories of his life with them. He listened attentively to their conversations. He felt a sense of camaraderie with them. He had never felt so accepted before. One rainy evening, Mrs. Monteverde asked Junior to drive her to a dinner engagement. Mr. Monteverde was away on a business trip. The roads were slick, visibility was low. An air of unease filled the car. Suddenly the car sputtered and stopped. It was a flat tire. Junior pulled over to the side of the road. His heart sank. He knew this could take a while. He cursed his luck. Mrs. Monteverde was surprisingly calm. She offered Junior a reassuring smile. She told him it was all right. These things happen. Her composure surprised Junior. He had expected her to be frantic. As Junior worked on changing the tire, the rain intensified. Mrs. Monteverde stepped out of the car. She stood close to Junior, seeking shelter under his umbrella. The proximity was unexpected. It sent a shiver down Junior's spine. He stole a glance at Mrs. Monteverde. Her face was illuminated by the dim streetlights. She looked breathtaking. In that moment, something shifted within Junior. He felt an unfamiliar attraction. He quickly looked away, his heart pounding in his chest. The incident with the flat tire marked a turning point. Junior couldn't shake off the memory of that night. Mrs. Monteverde's image lingered in his mind. His feelings for her intensified. He felt a mixture of excitement and guilt. Mrs. Monteverde too seemed to reciprocate his feelings. She became more attentive to Junior. Their conversations grew longer, filled with subtle flirtations. Their eyes met more often, lingering a little too long. They found themselves alone together frequently. Mr. Monteverde was often away on business trips. They shared intimate dinners. They went on long drives along the coast. They stole kisses in the quiet corners of the mansion. Their affair was a dangerous secret. Junior knew it was wrong. He was betraying the trust of the man who gave him a chance. But he couldn't resist the allure of Mrs. Monteverde. He was caught in a web of forbidden desires. As the days turned into weeks, Junior was torn between his love for Mrs. Monteverde and his conscience. He was living a double life. He felt like a fraud. Guilt gnawed at him constantly. He tried to end the affair several times. He knew it was the right thing to do. But Mrs. Monteverde would always convince him to stay. She would shower him with affection. She would whisper promises of a future together. Junior knew their affair was built on shaky ground. He was a poor driver from the slums of Manila. She was a wealthy socialite. Their worlds were poles apart. He feared the consequences if their secret was ever exposed. He started having nightmares. He would wake up in a cold sweat. He would see Mr. Monteverde's face filled with betrayal and anger. He knew he was playing with fire. He feared that one day, he would get burned. The truth always has a way of coming out. One evening, Mr. Monteverde returned home unexpectedly from a business trip. He found Junior and Mrs. Monteverde in a compromising position. The sight sent a surge of rage through him. Mr. Monteverde was devastated. He felt betrayed by his wife and his trusted driver. The man he had welcomed into his home had shattered his family. He lashed out at Junior, his voice trembling with anger and hurt. Mrs. Monteverde tried to explain. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, but her words rang hollow. The evidence was right there in front of Mr. Monteverde's eyes. He refused to listen. The once happy home was now filled with anger, accusations, and tears. The children were confused and scared. The life they knew was crumbling around them. Junior felt responsible for the pain he had caused. Junior was immediately fired. Mr. Monteverde threatened to press charges against him for adultery. Junior knew he deserved it. He had made a terrible mistake. He was ready to face the consequences of his actions. But then, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Monteverde confessed to her husband that she was the one who seduced Junior. She claimed that Junior had resisted her advances at first. She pleaded with her husband to forgive her. Mr. Monteverde was torn. He loved his wife. He wanted to believe her. But the betrayal cut too deep. He couldn't bear the thought of living with a woman who had cheated on him. He decided to file for divorce. He wanted sole custody of his children. He was determined to erase Mrs. Monteverde and Junior from their lives. Junior knew he had to do something drastic. Junior couldn't bear the thought of the Monteverde children growing up without a mother. He had grown attached to them. He saw how much they needed their mother in their lives. He decided to take matters into his own hands. He approached Mr. Monteverde with a plan. He would confess to a crime he did not commit. He would claim that he had been stealing money from the Monteverdes for months. He would say that he had seduced Mrs. Monteverde to cover up his tracks. Mr. Monteverde was hesitant at first, but Junior was convincing. He had thought of everything. He had even planted fake evidence to support his claims. Mr. Monteverde saw this as an opportunity to save face. He agreed to Junior's plan. He withdrew the adultery charges. He filed a police report against Junior for theft. He told everyone that Junior had been manipulating Mrs. Monteverde all along. He wanted to protect his family's reputation. Junior was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He never revealed the truth about the affair. He accepted his punishment without complaint. He knew he was sacrificing his freedom for the woman he loved and the family he had betrayed. Life in prison was tough. Junior missed the Monteverde children dearly. He often thought about them. He wondered how they were coping with their parents' divorce. He hoped they were doing well. He carried the weight of his guilt and regret every single day. He had made a terrible mistake. He had hurt the people he cared about the most. He knew he could never truly atone for his sins. Years turned into a blur of monotonous routines and sleepless nights. Junior worked hard to be a model prisoner. He wanted to earn a chance at redemption. He wanted to make things right. He clung to the hope of a brighter future. After 5 long years, Junior was finally released from prison. He was a changed man. He had paid his debt to society, but he knew he had a lot to make up for. He returned to Manila, hoping to rebuild his life. One day, he received an unexpected phone call. It was Mrs. Monteverde. She had tracked him down. She wanted to see him. Junior was hesitant at first. He didn't know what to say to her. They met at a small cafe. They barely recognized each other. Time had not been kind to either of them. Mrs. Monteverde looked older, her face etched with sadness. She had gone through a difficult divorce. She had lost custody of her children. She apologized to Junior for everything that had happened. She admitted that she had been selfish and reckless. She had ruined her family because of her actions. She regretted everything. Junior listened patiently to Mrs. Monteverde's confession. He held no anger towards her. He understood that they had both made mistakes. They were both victims of their own desires. He told her about his time in prison. He told her about the guilt and regret he had carried with him all those years. He told her about his hopes for redemption. Mrs. Monteverde was moved by Junior's words. She had always blamed herself for Junior's imprisonment. She had never forgotten him. She had never stopped loving him. But she knew they could never be together. Too much had happened. They parted ways that day with a newfound understanding. They had forgiven each other. They had found a measure of peace. They knew that their paths would never cross again. They were ready to move on with their lives.